Whether I use an infrastructure token or an application token, and the questions of token standards, of interoperability, but also probably, yes. So all these questions are technical questions that are but tied into economic and legal and ethical questions. Privacy has the question of technical privacy is very tied into ethical questions and legal questions. The question of scalability is tied into economic questions, or the fee structures. It's an infrastructure question, but also an economic question of, the business models that you're designing, etc. Now, so on a technical side, obviously, we have computer science question. On the legal side, we need a different set of lawyers with different know-how, from a tax law to privacy law to data protection law, but also any other securities law if it's a security. So the legal question, it's not enough to have one lawyer in the team. Depending on what kind of token system you're designing, you probably need a set of different lawyers to help you answer all the different legal aspects that are tied to the design of your token system. And for asset tokens, the technical and the legal questions are probably the most relevant. And the legal question being, how do I design the token in a legally compliant way that is compliant with the jurisdiction, regulation, and legally, how do I make legally compliant smart contracts? But this is usually a question that needs to be resolved hand in hand with the engineers, the computer scientists on board. The economic, but usually with asset tokens, these are use cases we've known for a while. We know how it works, and we know the business processes behind asset tokens. We have regulation that is in place, and the only question is, how do we make this legally compliant? While this is not very, this is complex enough, but the complexity is the complexity of making it legally compliant, especially across multiple jurisdictions. But we know the business models and the dynamics of asset tokens and how securities can be gamed, insider trading, all these things. It's not a new thing. So the dynamics of these markets are not completely new. While with purpose-driven tokens, tokens that steer communities, some call them purpose tokens, some call them incentive tokens, some call them social tokens, lawyers call them utility tokens. It's actually a word I'm not a big fan of, but these tokens, and this is where we see we don't even have the right words for these tokens yet. These tokens, they have completely tokens that incentivize individual action towards a collective goal. This is a completely new type of value creation. And we don't have enough best practices for how to design these tokens in an attack-resistant way. We figured out an attack-resistant mechanism with proof of work, but that is a mechanism to incentivize peer-to-peer computing. It's not a mechanism to incentivize CO2 emission reduction or to incentivize, social media contributions or attention, such as the basic attention network. So these other type of systems need other type of mechanisms. And the questions tied to the design questions here are economic design questions. Relevant fields here are economics, not business, mind you, like microeconomics, macroeconomics, like monetary policy. The mechanism design is macroeconomics. The monetary policy itself is macroeconomics. The mechanism design is microeconomics. But we also need, we can draw on know-how from network science and design of cyber-physical systems, et cetera, So, or behavioral economics, as we were designing, for example, the CO2 token in Vienna, a lot of behavioral economics questions were relevant in the design of the system. And last but not least, the ethical questions. Two of the most important questions here are transparency versus privacy. the trade-off between transparency versus privacy, and the trade-off and the question of power structures in a network. Yeah, so this is only supposed to be an intro, so unfortunately I cannot deep dive into the different aspects. I would like to conclude with these two slides. I think the first question that you have to or the first thing that is important is to understand that tokens can different properties. So of course, the technological properties, it's an infrastructure token, application token, all the things that we mentioned before. If it's like kind of an infrastructure token, is a public infrastructure or a federated infrastructure, these has different kind of legal implications for the use cases that you build on top of them. Then one very important question is does the token represent something of the real world that exists today that you buy, such as a piece of art? And these art NFTs, they are bought with money that already exists, right? So, or is the token minted upon proof of a specific network behavior? Bitcoin is minted upon proof of work, when you contribute work for the network, right? Steam Power is minted upon kind of the proof of your contribution to a post in the network or curation in the network. The CO2 token in Vienna is conceptualized to be minted upon proof of if you can prove that you reduce CO2, then token is minted. So this is a very different type of value creation when you bring a proof of certain behavior that is valuable to a network than buying it with existing money. Buying something, an asset with existing money, it's capitalism as we know it. And the other thing is a new type of value creation. And we have to distinguish these two use cases. As for rights, as I said, a token can represent property rights, access rights, voting rights, and/or management rights, or a combination of all of them. As for fungibility, the token can have unique attributes or identical attributes. As for durability, there can be an expiry date or an expiry event, or there is no expiry date or expiry event. As for transferability, it can be transferable, or it can have non-transferable, tied to your identity, or it can have some kind of limited conditional transferability. And then many questions around privacy and other legal aspects. So when you design your token system, this is the step-by-step that you have to follow. Define your purpose. Be clear about what you want to do and keep it simple. Then from your purpose, you derive the necessary token properties. Then from that, you check the implications of your chosen token properties with different domain experts, tech, law, econ, etc. And before you deploy your system that you designed in your head, it would be great if you would simulate it, your economic model in various iterations, especially in the case of purpose tokens, incentive tokens, simulation is very important, right? Asset tokens, not so much. We, don't probably need to simulate that unless it's complex DeFi products. Yeah, simulate your model and see how that works out before you deploy it. And once you've simulated it and you're fairly safe or secure about that, then you go into deploying kind of this token system. So to close, and I think I'm over time, if you remember the slide that I showed in the beginning, we have these 4 types of token types. I think asset tokens, as I said, are the gateway drug to this new token economy. Why? Because it's the thing we understand best and which is less complex to model, right? And we understand the legal regulatory environment around it, and we have to make the regulatory environment Web3 friendly, and we have to make the token use cases regulatory compliant. But that's kind of a techno-legal question. Everything else is dependent on technological standards and the incentive tokens that steer DAOs I think that will be the most important game changer in this new upcoming token economy and this Web3. But there we're still in the very, very beginning of understanding how to design and steer these token systems. And if you want to learn a bit more, if you're very new to the topic, maybe you want to check out my book, Token Economy. It's a primer to the Web3 and Web3 use cases and DAOs and all that stuff. And I'm currently also writing a new book where I'm focusing on token use cases, analyzing token use cases, and giving guidelines to how to design your token system. So follow me online, and I'll hope to share more information in the next few months.
Thank you, Shermin, for this insightful presentation. I will hand the word now to Clement.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Shermin. Actually, a lot of great kind of content for me to base also kind of the presentation I'm going to be doing here. Just putting a timer on because I want to be mindful of the time. And yeah, let me share my screen. Okay. What do we have? Just a second. I think this is it. This. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. Okay, so this presentation here today, I think I will be focusing mostly on what you categorize as asset and incentive network tokens and application tokens. And I will basically try to see how the best practices that you described earlier match or do not match the current kind of development efforts being put in the DeFi space, and also apply the methodology suggested by token engineering best practices to one project that we are just announcing as a company. So for those of you who don't know me, because I also know a few people in the chat, my name is Clem and I work at Kiko, a blockchain development company. I'm working there as a product developer, and today I will be walking you through a few different things that I hope are going to be insightful to you and will give you kind of a better understanding of what token engineering can look like in practice through a few use cases and a few examples. And finally, at the end, I will demo you into a web interface, a web app that we've built and that we just launched. And yeah, I hope you're gonna have a good time with me. So briefly, before I start diving into the content, what is Kiko, the company that I'm working for? Kiko is a technology company that builds products and offers professional services to stakeholders and individuals or collectives that want to launch or maintain digital ecosystems. Now, those digital ecosystems can either be at the impulse of corporates, but it can also be directly supporting large or not so large existing crypto networks that need support in a variety of fields, from DevOps to core infrastructure to smart contract development, and also token engineering, because we do provide the services. We've helped major networks like Cello, Filecoin, Ocean, and others launch. We have track record of 3 major ecosystem launches over the past 18 months, and we've managed to grow the team quite consequently over the course of the last 15 months. Okay, so token engineering 101. This is actually a graph that I pulled from the token engineering GitHub repo, which I think Shermin, before you contributed to quite a bit as well, together with some other people from the community that have curated a list of very interesting content with regards to crypto economics design, token engineering, and kind of the different things that we touched briefly upon in the previous presentation. And so I highly recommend that if you're new to the topic, if you're just curious, or if you want to dive into one thing specifically, maybe a crypto economic primitive you're interested in, you go to that website, and from there you'll be able to see different things. And so what I try to do here is I went there and I looked at the, kind of the different suggested methodologies for approaching and building and launching a token. And as you can see on the right-hand side, like crypto economic systems, as it was mentioned before, kind of touch upon like many different disciplines that for long might have been kind of isolated from one another. But today kind of makes sense to consider all together when you're designing complex systems. And so, as mentioned also earlier, there's different ways. There's no one single way to go about it. But the idea of engineering the development of putting engineering practice in the development of a token is to create some sort of like methodology and structured approach in how you design, how do you design and optimize for the goal that you set for your network. And so for that, a bunch of kind of steps can be taken. The first one being obviously to clearly identify the goals and the properties of the network that you want to design for. Then second, modeling the system and identifying those mechanisms, and that being done by looking at like patterns, also looking at like what mechanisms already in place work and how you can reuse them for your own purpose and to fulfill kind of the goal that you previously set for your network. And then best practice would also suggest that you simulate, as it was suggested before, and you test your system prior to the deployment of the network. And then finally, of course, the deployment and the iteration live. But the DeFi space. So for those of you who are not familiar with this, what I'm going to try to do here is I'm going to try to see how the best practices match or do not match current kind of development trends in the decentralized finance space. So as it was rightfully mentioned before, the amount of application and use cases for blockchain and tokens is huge, right? Potentially a lot of things can be tokenized, a lot of concepts, a lot of industries can just be completely disrupted by this piece of technology. But there are currently limitations as to how the physical and the virtual world can best collaborate using the hardcore principles of blockchain, because of an issue called the oracle problem. And the oracle issue is this idea of having complexity in tracking and proving that an action in the physical world has happened and then record it on the blockchain. So because of that and many other reasons, what we've seen lately is the rise, and starting last year, is the rise of a field called decentralized finance. And what decentralized finance is about is basically financial products being built on top of decentralized systems, and tokens tied to those networks acting as application and incentive tokens. And so in these networks, the goal for these networks, the goal is actually quite straightforward. Most of them compete on attracting and retaining capital. So while a network like Bitcoin, for instance, might require as a resource to be efficient mining power from miners, DeFi protocols instead are looking for the capital in itself. So what that means is that the higher the liquidity and the higher the volume and the higher the activity in these kind of networks, the more efficient the financial products that are built on top become. And when I mean financial products, I'm talking about options, I'm talking about derivatives, I'm talking about lending markets, I'm talking about all these kind of like financial services that were once only kind of reserved to an elite, are now starting to be available to anyone holding tokens and just having an Ethereum wallet, and well, currently also being able to afford gas fees, but that's a different topic. Okay, so that's for the goals and the properties. The goals and the properties for a decentralized finance app is to attract and retain capital. How do they model a system, or what kind of like patterns and kind of techniques can they put in place? Well, they have so-called liquidity mining programs, which are basically schemes that allow the network to mint tokens in exchange for liquidity provisioning. Now, if you don't understand what I'm saying here, actually, it's quite straightforward. The idea is that most of these tokens working in conjunction, most of these DeFi tokens are actually built on the Ethereum, inside the Ethereum ecosystem. And in order for them to be attractive for investors and for users, there needs to be high liquidity to these markets, so that the exchange from one asset to the other becomes efficient. And so for that, protocols can put in place so-called liquidity mining program, where they are going to start offering as a financial service to a community or a financial product. And then that token that they'll be mining will be a token that will give potentially rights or rights in the governance, rights in the or ownership share by getting like some rent-seeking functions, etc., etc. But what people will do is that they'll contribute capital to other markets, and then because these markets are fully on-chain, they can prove to the protocol that's newly launched that liquidity has been added for the purpose of the network. So you have, if we had the KPI token, that would mean that we would, if we provide liquidity to existing markets for an ETH KPY pair, then we would be able to prove that we've provided liquidity, and we'd be rewarded for it in KPI's token. So you have like a lot of schemes where basically protocols incentivize users to contribute liquidity to the network, and for that they are rewarded in gov tokens or other type, but most of the time actually governance tokens. Also, you have projects simply airdropping to their community. They would build like a financial application, like in the example of Uniswap being like the largest kind of decentralized exchange as of now. Uniswap has been used by the community, the Ethereum community, for a long time before they actually launched the governance token, and they did that through an airdrop, simply by rewarding the early adopters. So like these are the type of mechanisms and tools in place for protocols to attract and retain capital. Now, there's many other things you can look at. Obviously, you can build different APY strategy. So APY stands for annualized percentage yield. So how much, what will be your inflation policy with regards to your liquidity mining program? That's the API strategy. Then what if you're evaluating also the health of a network, you have the total value locked. This is in decentralized systems, and particularly for DeFi, this is really kind of one of the most important parameter or KPI that you can use to evaluate how efficient a network is, by looking at how much ETH or dollar value is being locked in the smart contracts of the protocol. And then you can use also all type of other metrics like revenue to market cap ratio. You can also look at smart contract dependencies and so on. But to go back to the best practices, the testing and the iteration prior to the deployment are not so common in the space, and that's because most of the time the implications for the development team behind those projects can be quite legally harsh to them. So you have a lot of anonymous collectives deploying with the motto of testing in prod. This is like kind of a very common meme in industry, if I may say, because people just will tend to publish and deploy a risky code by informing everyone as well that the users are at risk by interacting with that protocol. But then there's iterations from the community and from other anonymous members of the crypto community that would just either patch the bug or fork the network and enhance it, make it more robust, etc., etc. So it's very organic, but you kind of see those patterns of actually not testing and simulating beforehand. But that's mostly for kind of small, maybe medium cap. Some of them have started literally, testing in prod and have slowly become prominent and big. But if you, major networks are obviously immune to, well, not immune, but obviously testing and putting together a lot of like best practices around their engineering effort. Okay. So what are the limitations of like processing as this? Well, right now in the industry, in particular in decentralized finance, as I said, the liquidity mining program, meaning that the token incentives for people to provide liquidity to the smart contracts, can often and sometimes not really capture value that's being generated by the network. So many governance tokens have kind of offer the promise that at some point there will be rent-seeking fees on the network, or offering specific, kind of like capital gains to their users or their holders. But that's maybe sometimes not really the case, and there's hardly any correlation yet between the governance token and kind of like the protocol revenues that these networks can create. So very interesting, but emerging. And so you have kind of like this market risk of actually launching governance tokens that don't capture value directly at the protocol level. Then other risks include smart contract dependencies, unaudited contracts, I already just mentioned, and then also the yield farming wars, right? So that's, I hope, a question someone asked or had in mind. But if everyone is competing to attract and retain capital, then that means that every protocol out there must be having a strategy in place to kind of have vampire attacks from one network to the other. And literally, yield farming is about this, right? It's about people that in the market spot on opportunities to move funds around from one protocol to the other, to the protocol that's going to be yielding the most rewards. And in December 2020, we had the example of Sushi versus Uniswap, where over $1 billion flew in TVL, so in total value locked from Uniswap to SushiSwap, just because this network, which was just a complete copy of this with a different monetary policy, managed to attract a lot of capital. And right now, interestingly enough, the two are kind of like living together nicely, but are not no longer like just exclusive or the two of them nice working together in the ecosystem, if I think so. Testing prod gone wrong. Obviously, testing in prod is risky. So you've had episodes like algorithmic stablecoins that have happened. For those of you who don't know, stablecoin is a token that's pegged to the value of fiat currencies like the US dollar or the euro. And algorithmic, meaning that it's only basically creating incentives for users and holders to keep the stability going. And I'm thinking of the Frax, I'm thinking of the bases, the DSD, many different projects, very interesting projects are looking at doing this. There's multiple examples of networks that have failed doing it, and consequently make a lot of users and investors lose consequent amount of money in them. And obviously smart contract bugs. Okay, let me check the time. Whoa. Sorry, my phone. Okay, I will have to be quick. Now, going back to this idea of setting like goals, thinking of incentive mechanisms and testing, here at Kiko, we are operating a so-called validator for a network called Cello. Cello being a purpose-driven network on a mission to bank the unbanked. And for that purpose, what we did is, so we were running a validator for them, and we were thinking of like, how can we incentivize more users to delegate to our validator? Meaning, how can we secure, how can we provide more security to the network? And for running that validator, we are automatically being disbursed CUSD, which is cryptocurrency, by the protocol. And so the incentive mechanism really, that like we try to think of like crypto for social good, and we started with the intent of trying to convert like greed into social good, and the scheme that we came up with is basically incentivizing users to delegate to our validator by having them mint in exchange for their delegation a governance token that they can use to influence donations that we do to universal basic income programs in partnership with Impact Market. We're testing in prod. Funnily, we're testing in prod because we are launching the first kind of voting ceremony next week, Wednesday, 7:30 p.m. And I'm going to show you briefly what the app looks like and what this is about. But basically, this is the web page. I suggest that if you own some Cello, you visit the dojo.kiko.io/cello/farm website. And from this interface, you can delegate to our validator. You can earn a standard APY better than a traditional bank account with 5.4% on your asset. And on top of that, you will be farming a token called Vmojo that lets you vote on proposals for donations. And the first two projects that we're going to be working with are going to be a project in Ghana for the Krizan refugee camp that's going to be receiving CUSD, the underlying cryptocurrency, and the other one for farming communities in the Philippines. And the whole idea is to basically take a chunk of like those insane kind of capital movements that happen in the place to give it to those who are the most in need and who for a long time, have been not privileged enough to have access to basic financial services, and empower them by giving them hands-on, utility for of CUSD so that they can help, fuel network adoption. So if you're interested in this, I encourage you to go there. I've published also a couple of posts on this idea of impact farming. And if you want to reach out, talk about a project you have in mind or anything, you can just contact me via email. That's it. I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you so much, Clement, for the insightful presentation as well. This impact farming is very interesting. We basically ran out of time. I don't know if you guys want to stay for a few minutes to answer two questions that we have for Shermin.
Sure. I have time. Sorry for extending my talk, but like the bases are, I'm happy to stay longer for everyone who wants to stay longer in the call. Yeah. Okay,
we just have two questions, one from Gurav and another from Luca. Can you see them in the Q&A?
I think I already answered two. Maybe you read them and then I'll answer them. Because I see everything.
One is from Gurav and is asking about, it's a pretty long question. Gurav, maybe you want to come up to speak it yourself, the question, or if you are...
Okay, I can read it here now. I saw it.
Okay, yeah, because Gurav, cannot speak, is a participant, sorry.
Okay, this is too, I don't know, maybe Clement is better in answering. It's a UTXO related question around UTXO and account-based models. Unfortunately, I don't have enough technical insights to answer that question. Clement, is that more up your alley?
Okay, I'm going to read the question out loud. I'm not sure. I don't think I know what a UTXO.
These are the UTXO-based system like Bitcoin. I understand the question, but I don't have enough insight to answer this. It's very technical, a super technical question. It's not up my alley, so I can't answer that. The other question was from
Hyperledger.
Yeah, while implementing, you always need a wallet. It doesn't matter which kind of distributed ledger network is used as a settlement for your tokens, right? You need a wallet that it can kind of authenticate you and to use Hyperledger Fabric for a token system. Then your users will need a Hyperledger Fabric a wallet that you build on top that communicates with the kind of blockchain network in the backend. And this is exactly one of the problems that we have in this emerging Web3, is that in the backend we have many with incompatible blockchain networks are very good settlement tools for their own tokens, but they have no native communication possibility between each other, right? So an Ethereum compatible token will not be compatible with the Bitcoin ecosystem. So one of the biggest problems in tokenization and wallet adoption is to have multi-purpose wallets that can handle various blockchain systems. It is possible, but it's still painstaking to develop these wallets, and we've seen a lot of development there. And your question will tie into probably the question of, will there be a winner takes it all solution of the best blockchain network with best adoption, etc.? Will we have wallet solutions that are not proprietary, that encompass multiple token systems or not? This is actually one of the biggest bottlenecks in usability of token adoption. So valid question, the answer is not quite clear, right? But what is clear is you always need a wallet, and you need a wallet that can communicate with the token standard of the blockchain infrastructure that the wallet that settles this token. Yeah. Is this answer questioned?
Yes, I guess. Right. We can also move on to Luca's question regarding tokenization on real estate, since there is no way to register properties titles back in blockchain ledger yet. I understand that a company. Can you read? Like,
yes. So I think it's a question regarding tokenization of real estate. Mm-hmm. Regarding tokenization of real estate, since there is no way to register property titles in blockchain ledgers yet, I understand that a company that needs the property, that owns the property, must be tokenized, and that there are some countries that offer the possibility to tokenize a private company, correct? In that case, the company shares are issued on a blockchain level, and the company can quickly dilute it and token shares. Yeah, so the first thing is true, what you said. that in order to have, like in theory, it is possible to tokenize. In theory, technically, we can create a digital twin, a digital representative, a tokenized certification of a deed, right, of a property title. The question is whether that country recognizes this as a kind of for the legal transfer of the deeds. But technically it's possible, and probably one of the prerequisites would be that property titles are managed by distributed ledgers. And many countries are in fact already working on prototypes, moving into that area. So this use case, while it's technically already in theory possible, will depend on the fact when we will have property titles settled by distributed ledgers in countries, and when there is when we have the regulatory framework, then these use cases will become really feasible. And this is why, and this is the second part of your question, currently the only tokenization use cases in the real estate market is kind of tokenizing assets or baskets of ownership of a basket of real estate. And this is not a new thing, right? So kind of having shares in an index of real estate is also already possible in legacy systems. But this is because the regulatory framework is not there yet. But once the regulatory framework is there, once everyone along the supply chain of real estate industry is on a distributed ledger, and once there are common standards, then we can start to have fractional ownership, and this will become very interesting.
All right.
Yeah, we actually have, sorry to jump in, but we actually are working closely with Blockimo that we've helped launch, blockimo.ch. It's a project based out of Switzerland that's actively looking into this, and we actually are leveraging kind of the flexible legal framework that Switzerland has to offer there for tokenizing real estate. And so, yeah, I will drop the link in the chat if you want to have a look at it.
Thank you, Clement. We have Andrew and Jurdik as the last questions in the Q&A, and then Sebastian has raised his hand, and I will allow to talk him in a bit. Do we want to address Andrew's question quickly? Andrew is asking, let's say an individual is involved in a really tokenized economy, many tokens, many wallets, many systems. How would you suggest they have control over this? Voting, moving funds, farms, it's a lot to request from an individual. Maybe this side of things is good for deep-pocketed corporation, but not for individuals.
Right. So I think it's a very good question. And I think the answer would be, I don't exactly know, although I think there are already models that show that through delegation and through basically trust of parties, you can kind of make the work easier for you. But what I do know as well is that even in current kind of large cap protocols, there's a lack of governance participation from token holders, and it's typically only very few actors that actively kind of engage with the governance questions of the system, et cetera, et cetera. So it's an interesting question. I think probably probably you would have a final settlement layer that would allow you to automatically, maybe switch from one asset to the other. But I also think that expecting high level of involvement, particularly for voting, etc., from users, is maybe out of reach for the time.
I think this is a very good question in the sense also because it shows how tech-driven the Web3 is. And what you're saying, Clement, is something where political scientists laugh. It's not a new insight that, you have the mental transaction costs and people are reluctant to participate in decision-making processes. They, in theory, can participate because they either don't have the knowledge or they don't have the time bandwidth to decide, make meaningful decisions in the system, which is why we often why we moved away from a kind of a direct democracy to a delegated democracy, a representative democracy in our nation state systems. There is a reason, because people don't have enough bandwidth for settling these mental transaction costs of deciding on everything they could decide, which is why they vote for delegates. And one of the things that we're seeing in the Web3 is because it's driven by software developers. They want to reinvent the wheel, and they're excluding the people who have the domain knowledge, social scientists, political scientists who've studied that for decades, if not centuries. I mean, not themselves, but they're building their studies on centuries of know-how of political science. And so decentralized organizations, and the Web3 is a system of DAOs, kind of is a socioeconomic system. And the technology is just a tool for us to interact. And obviously, this interaction will always have human aspects, social and economic aspects, which is why, and economics is a social science, right? And so in this, my presentation, as I was pointing out, I think I had it somewhere, but I didn't explicitly mention it. Obviously, political sciences or politically scientists in the design of those token systems are a very important building block, especially when we design DAOs, because we don't have to reinvent the wheel. And there is a lot of data we can draw upon from network science and political science, where we know how, and behavioral science, under which conditions people participate in democratic structures in which way, or in voting structures in which way. So, so thank you for this question, because we need, when we design these systems, we need to include the right people. And technical programming part is very important, but it's only one part. And I think the last question is regarding biometrics, fingerprinting, iris, no.
Yeah, from Nordic.
Yeah, how do you see the development of biometrics, such as fingerprinting, iris, DNA, in the present and future of all these ecosystems of tech and appliance? So there is the utopian and the dystopian vision. It's very tied to the kind of development of decentralized identities. This will obviously merge with biometrics. Clement, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I'm just thinking that at this point in time, like I mentioned also briefly, we are still having constraints in proving that physical input is actually correct on the blockchain. So here I'm thinking about biometrics, and I'm thinking about fingerprint, iris, like that you're talking about here. As long as there's no formal way to verify that this input can't be biased in how they're recorded onto the chain, it's going to be difficult to have those sort of integrations. There's hardware work and research being done on how this can be done through enclaves and type of hardware like Intel SGX and trusted execution environments that IoT projects, IoT/blockchain projects are looking into that could make it possible. But I think I'm not looking. I have no idea, because I really see that as something happening in in a consequent amount of time. If
all right, we take the last question from Mark. Let's just, Mark, are you here? You should be talking now.
The mic is deactivated.
Yeah, hello. But actually, I have no question. I think you mixed up.
Yeah, because you raised your hand, so we were thinking there wasn't.
Oh, sorry. Oh no, I was not intended to do. Sorry.
All right, great, thank you. Then I guess we can wrap up this session. Thank you so much to the panel, to the speakers, sorry, for this insightful presentation. And thank you to the participants, all of you that have enjoyed and engaged. And thank you for attending. Thank you, Shermin and Clement. And if you are interested to follow the other episode, don't forget to sign up on our link just pasted on the chat.
And thanks, Stefania, for all the organization. I know the effort it must have been to organize the speaker series.
It's a pleasure. So see you next time. Thank you so much to everyone.
Bye.
Have a nice
Thank you,
weekend.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.